The criminal charges against James Comey are historic, but President Trump is suggesting the former FBI director may not be his only political adversary facing an indictment in the near future. Speaking today, the president implied that some of his other political foes could soon be targeted. Here's how he responded to a question about a possible list of other opponents who could be in the DOJ's crosshairs.
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt. These were corrupt, radical left Democrats. But Comey essentially was he's worse than a Democrat. I would say the Democrats are better than Comey. But no, there'll be others. Look, that's my opinion. He lied. That was a very important question that he was asked. And he wanted to be specific, but he didn't. The only thing that happened to him, he didn't think he'd get caught.
CNN's Caitlin Polantz is here with us on this story. All right, Caitlin, walk us through these indictments. It's not a very long indictment, and tell us where this goes.
2 pages, that's it. This is not what you would call a speaking indictment. Sometimes prosecutors write out everything or a lot of what they have, and you can get a very good sense of the case. What we have of this case so far, it's the 2 charges. One, obstruction of the congressional proceeding that is based around this testimony that Jim Comey gave back in 2020, September of 2020. There's also a false statements charge. So that zeroes in, it goes hand in hand with the obstruction charge. It zeroes in on a specific answer he gave in that 2020 testimony. He was asked by Senator Ted Cruz at the time if he had authorized someone to leak to the media, and Comey essentially said no. And he said he stood by previous testimony where he had also said no, he hadn't authorized someone to leak to the media. There isn't much more here. There's person 1, person 2, or person 3 named in these documents, but a lot of this is going to have to come out in court. The defense team will ask for more information. They will get evidence in the case, and then there will be a trial where much more about this alleged leak and what the Justice Department knows happened here will have to come out in the courtroom. That's a primary thing I'm looking for, right? What details are we going to get about what happened? What has the Justice Department found to be able to present this case to the grand jury, get this indictment? I'm also going to be looking for how much politics will come into this courtroom. Right now, the first appearance for Jim Comey is on October 9th. It's going to be in the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, a courthouse where Donald Trump's 2016 campaign chair, Paul Manafort, was tried and convicted several years ago. So this is a courthouse that is no stranger to a high-profile political case around Trump. But we also, in that first appearance, we probably will hear Comey say he's not guilty, enter the pleading, and we'll get a sense of a timeline, how fast it'll move.
The alleged leak has to do with an investigation into person 1?
An unspecified investigation into person 1, and we're working right now to nail down exactly who that is. It could be based on the question that Ted Cruz asks in the Senate hearing. It could be either about the Clinton investigation in 2016 or the Trump investigation in 2016. So will this be a Russiagate redux, or will this be about Hillary Clinton and her emails again?
That would be ironic if he was standing up for Hillary Clinton and her emails. Caitlin Polantz, thank you so much for that. Jessica?
All right, let's talk more about the ins and outs of this case with Ankush Khardori. He's a former federal prosecutor, senior writer now for Politico magazine. Thanks so much for being here with us. Let's just start first with this idea that he was indicted by a federal grand jury. There were on 2 of the 3 counts that they were trying to get indictments on. They were not able to get an indictment on one of those. What does that tell you?
Well, it says that that particular count was quite weak, even too weak, even for it to pass muster with this grand jury. The standard that the grand jurors have to apply is a probable cause standard, meaning has the government presented sufficient evidence for the grand jurors to conclude that there's probable cause that the defendant committed the crime that they are accused of. It's much lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. The fact that one of the 3 counts was cut, highly unusual. But I have to say, I was a little surprised even that the grand jury returned this indictment at all, given the highly, highly irregular and highly public nature of Trump's interventions and his public pleading for Comey to be charged by his attorney general.
And help people level set that when it comes to getting, and you kind of brushed up against this, but getting an indictment returned, how hard is that? There's that saying you could indict a ham sandwich, but how hard is that? And you note that the burden is lower than what you traditionally see in a courtroom when it is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, look, the standard is much lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. One of the reasons why people say you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich is based on actually a little bit of a misunderstanding about how at least federal prosecutors work. One of the reasons why, a major reason, in fact, why grand jurors tend to sign off on proposed charges brought by federal prosecutors is that federal prosecutors tend to be very selective, and they don't bring frivolous charges. So there's already been a screening mechanism by the time the grand jurors are even hearing the case. And I think that's sort of an underappreciated element of why indictments are so regularly returned. This one, because, again, Trump was pleading with the attorney general to do it. He fired the U.S. attorney in the relevant jurisdiction and then installed someone with no criminal prosecutorial experience to do it for him to secure the indictment. All of that, provided me with some reason to believe that the grand jurors may not go along with it. They evidently did at least 2 of the 3 counts. But all of the problems that we all are aware of and all the irregularities we're all aware of, they're going to come up through the course of the litigation as well, the prosecution.
And lastly, I also want to ask you about just the idea that there were attorneys inside the Eastern District who were concerned enough they wrote a memo about what they were worried about when it came to trying to push this case forward. How concerned would they need to be to write a memo? What kind of layer does that add for you?
Yeah, this is extremely unusual. So I actually spent some time prosecuting cases in the Eastern District of Virginia when I was a prosecutor in the Alexandria office. So it is often the case that prosecutors write prosecution memos or declination memos explaining why a case cannot be proved at trial beyond a reasonable doubt, why they think they probably won't prevail at trial. It is very unusual for prosecutors to write a memo, as has been reported, that instructs the higher ups that they don't even think an indictment will be returned because there's not probable cause to believe that a crime was committed. That's very unusual for a memo to have to be written that way and for it to be delivered and then disregarded by the political leadership. That is not something at all that happens every day.
Yeah, all right. Well, this is all really important context. Ankush, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.